The most critical thing for teenage girls is to make sure that they have good education. So countries, Kenya inclusive, need really to scale up their investments in education, making sure that all teenage girls have opportunities to access education, and not just education, it's quality education, because it's the quality education that will help them develop the skills that they need to help the country harness the demographic dividend. So, but beyond that, during the teenage years are also very, very, critical years, because those are the years when those are the years when young people are actually transitioning, maturing as far as sexuality is concerned. So it's very, very critical that apart from providing education, we need to make sure that they have the information and services that they need to live, healthy sexual lives, or to actually be, be well prepared to make decisions that they will protect themselves as they maneuver through their sexual maturation processes. So 3 critical things: it's really education, skill development in terms of skills, life skills, but also skills that they need for economic production, and sexual and reproductive health services. Adolescence is really a very, very critical period in human development. That's the time when kids are developing some independence. That's when they are experiencing sexual maturation, transitioning from, where you don't look at the opposite sex with a lot of interest, to demonstrating interest and paying, also realizing that other people are looking at you. So that whole process of transitioning, of maturing sexually, is also associated with young people being very curious, trying out new things. And a lot of the new things that they try out is forming relationships with the opposite sex, or with people of their, their own friends, boys, maybe with other boys, and so on. So you are expanding your cycle beyond your family to start forming friends, to start having, relationships with people. But also there's the whole issue about peer pressure. This is the time when a lot of young people are seeing what others are doing, and they can learn from what the others are doing. Peer pressure can be positive, but it can also be negative. And in this era, there are things to do if your friends are involved sexually, or they have a relationship. Are you going to do the same? But there's also this very, very critical thing happening now about drug abuse and so on. So a lot of young people are being exposed to these issues. So you can see that as young people, maneuver all these changes that are happening in their lives, as they interact with others, opposite sex, people who are peddling drugs at young people and so on, they have the decisions that they make can have lifelong implications on their well-being, on their health, even, some of them, because if for instance you get sexually involved and you are not protecting yourself, you can contract sexually transmitted infections, you can contract HIV/AIDS, and for girls you can even become pregnant. So when we talk about this being a uniquely vulnerable period, it's really correct, because it's the time when young people make decisions that can change the course of their lives. And the critical thing for governments, for all development partners, is to make sure that we prepare young people to, with the correct information, but also give them the services they need to protect themselves against making decisions or indulging in practices that would endanger their lives. The FP 2020, so that's Family Planning 2020, it's a program that was devised by a lot of partners, led by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the British government, DFID. To basically, the whole aim is to try to make sure that by the year 2020, 120 million women who don't have access to family planning can now access family planning. And this is focusing on women in developing countries. And a lot of focus is on African countries. And so the FP 2020 program, what it has done is to mobilize the international community, but also mobilize the commitment of African leaders to really make sure that family planning becomes universally accessible to all people who need it. And it's very, very clear that adolescents and mainly teenagers are uniquely, their unique vulnerability also relates to the fact that even when they are sexually involved, it's not easy for them to access services. Part of the problems relate to the healthcare system that provides family planning. In most cases, it's not well attuned to their needs. There's been an effort to say, let's have youth-friendly services, but these haven't been scaled up really to a large scale, even in a country like Kenya. So the FP 2020 program is very critical. When you look at the priorities, the good thing about it is also it's not like just a top-bottom program where people come and say, do this. Every country is actually, does come up with their own priorities. So like a country like Kenya, you look at a country like Malawi, they've come up with their priorities. And you see that in many of these countries, they identify adolescents and youth as a uniquely vulnerable group that they need to pay attention to. So Kenya, actually, the statistics on teenage pregnancy in Kenya are quite worrying. In many other African countries, there's some sort of decline, steady decline in teenage pregnancies. But when you look at Kenya over the last 10, 15 years, the numbers have remained more or less the same or increased a little bit. So it's really a major concern, because for a country like Kenya, that really, when you look at the development aspirations that Kenya has, achieving Vision 2030, turning into an upper middle income country by then, it's really going to be hard for the country to achieve that if the sort of high levels of teenage pregnancies continue. Because what do teenage pregnancies do to girls? They actually curtail their education prospects, their development prospects. And you have a child while you are a teenager. Some may go back to school. The evidence shows that the majority who get children during the teenage years don't go back to school. So it's really a crisis, you would say. I think for a country like Kenya, when you look at the resources the country has, the technical know-how, the technical capacity, the country really needs to rally all the resources that are there, all the wealth that the country has, to make sure that this challenge is actually addressed. And we need to make sure that young people get the right information. Recognizing that there are some young people who will not get sexually involved, but there are some who will. So for those who are able to abstain and so on from sex, then that's fine. Continue encouraging them so they stay like that. But for those who are sexually involved, you have to make sure that they have the means to protect themselves. And this is a contentious area where a lot of religious leaders and sometimes even we as parents come in and say, why do you want to talk to our young children aged 13, 14 about sex? Or this will encourage them to have sex. But the evidence is that if you provide more information to young people, it gets them to be ready, because you will not be there as a parent when they decide to have sex. Now, do you want them to have sex at a time when they are not ready or they don't know how they can protect themselves? That's why we talk about comprehensive sexuality education, which should start at young ages, even as young as 10. It has to be appropriate, of course, to the specific ages, because you can't be talking to 10-year-olds the way you are talking to 19-year-olds. So the information has to be well packaged. It has to be age appropriate. But we need to start talking to young people at an early age, making sure that at all these stages, for those who may cross the line, they have the means, they have the services to protect themselves. A number of years ago, there used to be a perception that a lot of young people who are having sex with much older men, the so-called sugar daddies and so on. But evidence that has been generated, the more recent evidence is showing that actually a lot of the young people who are sexually involved are actually having sex with their age mates. So it's the boys. Now you can't try to address the issue of teenage pregnancy, for instance, by just focusing on girls. You have to talk to the boys as well. And so I think the whole issue, I think it should be about really making sure that we also target boys. The boys have to respect girls. They have to make sure that some of the practices that they do, or getting a girl to be sexually involved, can actually destroy the life of the girl. But on education, we also have to make sure that we're not just focusing on girls. We don't want a situation where now in 10, 15 years we'll have better educated women and they can't find men to marry and so on. So I think it should be balanced. Right now, the evidence on the table is that girls are much more vulnerable than boys. And putting more emphasis on girls is warranted. But we can't just do that exclusive and leave out the boys, because the boys are part of the equation. I think it's just to say, yeah, I think the focus on teenage girls is very, very critical. This is a menace that African countries have really to make sure that we address. Our children need to be in school. They shouldn't be having kids. There was a saying at the London Family Planning Conference in 2012, where the president of Malawi said there should be no parenthood before adulthood. I think that's the principle that we need to embrace, and if we really want to embrace that, fully, then we'll make sure that, yeah, there are some issues, contentious issues that we have to deal with and so on. But at the end of the day, we have to commit to saying we should not have a child who is a teenager, start giving birth to other children. Their role in society is to get the education, the skills that they will need to help our countries develop.